All right, in the last video, we learned how to use puppet warp to angle the anatomy of the creature to make it match the setting, right? Now, we have to match the lighting to the setting. And the easiest way to start that is just through your direct adjustments. So remember, those are just the same as we were using on the individual compositing assignments. They are levels, color balance, and hue saturation. So now that I have it placed, scaled, and angled, now I'm going to play with levels. And a lot of this has to do with kind of squinting and using the mid-tone slider and asking myself, does it need to go darker overall to match this lighting condition, or does it need to go brighter? And for mine, to my eye, it definitely needs to go brighter. So if you look at the difference, you can see it in your history. From there to there, this feels like it matches the setting a little bit better. Next is color balance. This is the temperature of the lighting. Now both of these are fairly warm in how they're lit, but I can always play with it. Starting with midtones, maybe I warm it up a little bit, right towards the yellow, away from the blue, a little towards the red and away from the cyan. Maybe in the shadows, I push it a little bit more towards the cyan and a little bit more towards the blue and magenta. Get some of those purples back in there. Just a little bit. Now in the highlights, let's go a little bit greener and a little bit yellower. So it's just adjusting and seeing and try not to overdo it, and a little bit redder. And I usually have to push it a little too far, like that's too far green, to find what's helpful. And again, I can use my history. So that's what it was just after levels. That's what it was before levels. Levels, then color balance. Color balance kind of helped warm it up. Now I can go to hue saturation, see if it needs any kind of big adjustment. So hue saturation would change its hue. Neither of those really works really well, so I'm going to really zero it in. Definitely on, let's see. Yeah, it's really right where it needs to be. But then saturation, how colorful. And notice that my creature is more colorful than my setting, which makes sense. So I might just need to desaturate it a little bit. Not too much. I still want it to look like it has those colorful wings, but just in this setting. So that made a big difference, right? Levels, color balance, hue saturation, to help it match its environment. Now we have to deal with the lighting in terms of not just the color temperature and the overall brightness or darkness, but the actual shadows and direction of lighting. And you'll notice in my reference, I have these deep shadows on this side of the rock. So it means lighting is coming from this direction. And it's hitting my creature from that direction too, but the difference is my creature doesn't have heavy shadows underneath it. So I need to create those heavy shadows underneath it. And on a surface like rock, those are going to be pretty sharp shadows, at least close to the creature, because rock is a smooth texture. So what do I do? This is tricky. I'm going to show you first the first new skill, because everything else has been stuff we've done before. I'm going to go to the very top layer, save my work of my proving ground number 1, and I'm going to make a new empty layer using this little post-it note, like in the layer window options, same as it was in Photopea. So new empty layer. Then I'm going to say edit and fill, just like we've done in Photopea, and I'm going to fill it with middle gray. So in Photoshop, it says 50% gray. I think Photopea just says gray. Normal 100%, all good. So now I have a gray layer on top of everything. You guys see that? Here's what I'm actually going to be doing. I'm going to use the dodge and burn tools. So to create shadows, I'm going to use burn. And I'm going to use burn on the midtones. I'm going to use it at an exposure of less than 30. I'm going to use it nice and large with a 0% hardness. I'm going to use it with my tablet so it's pressure sensitive. And I'm just going to burn shadows where I want them. This is what I'm going to be doing. But and I'll show you in just a second. So on this gray layer that I created, I'm using the burn tool. The burn tool looks like, both in Photopea and Photoshop, like a little hand cupped like this. This is based on enlarging photos in a darkroom, like traditional analog photos from an enlarger. And when you use your hand to kind of bend the light from the enlarger onto the photo paper, it burns the light into the photosensitive paper. So its burn is to darken. And when I darken, it takes that middle gray and it makes it darker. And the more I overlap it, the darker it gets, right? Now, when I change this from normal mode to overlay mode, you'll see the only change it makes is where I burned it. So let me start from the beginning. I make a new layer on top of everything, and then I say Edit Fill 50% gray. Then I changed its blending mode from normal to overlay. And you'll notice that it does absolutely nothing to my image because this is exact 50% gray. Overlay only lets things through that are darker than 50% gray or lighter than 50% gray, right? So when I burn, and in this case, I'm going to burn underneath the feet, I create the shadow. And what it's doing is creating the shadow not on my actual pixels, because I don't want to create a shadow that's on my landscape. So when I move my creature, the shadow's still there. I want to have it on a separate structure, right? Does that make sense? So this is what's called a non-destructive overlay layer. Is there anywhere else I need that? Well, I can do it on the creature as well. I'm going to burn the bottom side of the creature a little bit, like its legs, its arm. The problem is, as I'm burning the creature, I'm also burning the mountains behind the creature. And I don't necessarily want to do that. So this is what I'm going to do. This one that's over the top of everything, I'm going to fill it with gray again. I'm going to use this for overall dodging and burning. But for my creature, I'm going to do this. I'm going to select my creature layer. I'm going to use the magic wand with contiguous unchecked, and then select the empty space around my creature. This is another reason why it's really important to have a cleanly cut out creature. Then I am going to say, select the inverse. And this is something we've done before, but now it selects right inside my creature. Then I click on this gray layer that I created. That's an overlay layer. And then I hit duplicate, Command J. And what it does, if I do it normal mode, it makes a cookie cutter out of middle gray of just my creature's shape. Does that make sense to everyone? So now, when I change that to overlay mode, and now I burn the creature with my burn tool, now you see how it does not burn the mountains behind? Because it's only burning on this. It can't burn where there are no pixels. So that's a non-destructive overlay layer for your creature. Yes, yes. Make sense? And then this one is a non-destructive overlay layer for what's behind the creature, especially if I move it behind my creature layer. So now when I'm burning the shadows, it's only affecting the landscape. It's not affecting the feet of the creature. If I want to affect the feet of the creature, I have to go to the creature non-destructive overlay layer. And between the two, I can get pretty believable shadows underneath. And I can do them on the face as well. And that's just burning. And what's the other tool we have? We have dodge for highlights, right? And same thing, like I'll burn the underside of the wings a little bit, especially those tips, so it looks more dramatic. And remember, you only ever use burn in the midtones because you don't want it to go to black. You don't want it to get too strong. Nice thing about it being non-destructive, you can see all those shadows I've added, and they help, but I can always just take their opacity down a little bit too and figure out exactly the right amount. Same thing with the overall. I can just take that opacity down a little bit and decide what's right. Okay, next, this kind of controlled the angle of lighting on the creature, but maybe I want to just make it a little bit more dramatic to focus on the creature by getting rid of some of the light around the edges. This is called vignetting. So I'm going to make my burn tool really big, and I'm just going to hit my overall around the edges. So it kind of focuses in. Now the reason it's not affecting this is because it's behind. So if I wanted to affect this, I can always create a new one on top. So a new blank layer. So now I have 3 non-destructive overlay layers. You just always fill them with middle gray, and then you turn them to overlay mode. It's a nice way to show off where the burning I did on my creature is, right? Because that's a layer on top. And I'll often turn these non-destructive overlay layers, I'll actually mark them gray with color, just like I do red for a clone stamp. You want it less than 30, because it's just really strong. So to control it, I always say do it less than 30. So now on this overall one, I'm just going to darken the background a little bit, darken the edges a little bit. Get a little bit more drama. And then I can always play with the opacity of it. You know, that's with nothing. Maybe I want about that much. Okay. Now's the fun stuff. Atmosphere. We've done everything so far to build like clean assets where everything's pretty sharp and clear. But when you're compositing a creature into an environment, often you want the atmosphere to help add to the depth, right? The air, the mist. So this is what we do. I'm going to save my work, and then I'm going to go to Pixabay. Pixabay.com. I have my Proving Ground folder open here. And what I'm going to search for in Pixabay is clouds. Now, clouds, to me, are the most useful texture overlay always. It doesn't matter if you're underwater. Doesn't matter if you're, like these ones would be really nice. If it's a sandstorm. But you could find other textures too. Like you could look up sandstorm. But the thing is, you don't want it to have any sharp edges. You want it to just be kind of, in my mind, big shapes of clouds. So these are really dramatic clouds. So I'm going to download that. I'm logged in, so I might as well download the biggest possible. But it doesn't matter because we can grow it and it will soften, and clouds are soft. Then I'm going to bring it from my downloads and I'm going to put it into my folder because this is our first time using a texture overlay. This is really going to help your overall scene and your landscape. Now I'm going to drag that texture overlay on top of everything. And then I'm going to make it just so big on my scene like that. And it comes in like a smart object, as things do. I'll put it on top of everything.